Alrighty, guys. One more day of civil liberties. Now, apologies up front. I really wish I wasn't constrained to this format and we could be in the classroom. And in all reality, I would have gone through Amendments 1 through basically all of them that include your rights. But unfortunately, our time is coming to a conclusion, as in at some point you guys have to graduate, and I still have to do two more sections, federalism and political parties. So since we have about a month of that left, I must move on from civil liberties and move on from the judicial branch consequently. But I hope you found this stuff useful, especially when it comes to defending your rights and knowing your rights so that way it doesn't get abused and taken away from you. I could go on and on when it comes to discussions about these things, and if you want me to, by all means, just do it when it's like a Zoom or email or something like that. Anywho, let's review a little bit of what we've done in this civil liberties section. So we've talked about freedom of religion and how there's the Establishment Clause as well as the Free Exercise Clause. And basically, we came to the conclusion through various evidence with Thomas Jefferson's faith, what he meant by the letters from the Danbury Baptist, that separation of church and state was envisioned to keep government out of religion, which it kind of has done a good job, but it definitely has done a terrible job in keeping religion suppressed and making sure that religion can be in no aspect of public life. And that's not what Jefferson meant by that. So it's often interpreted as keeping religion out of government, when in reality it was meant to keep government out of religion. And those two things don't work both at the same time. Now, then we moved on talking about freedom of speech and the press and what are your rights when it comes to your opinions and vocalized views and stuff like that. We found out that freedom of speech was not unlimited. There's many cases such as incitement or false statement of facts or obscenity or commercial speak where freedom of speech is not protected because it says you have the right to say what you want. And that goes into like stuff that isn't vocalized, such as like flag burning, although that is an example of freedom of speech that is protected. But burning your draft cards is definitely not one of them because that's literally trying to overthrow the US government, in theory, even though it's more protests. That's not protected under the First Amendment. Sorry, Mr. O'Brien. And then we talked about freedom of security and ultimately what it means for the Second Amendment, what was originally implied, what does it mean for you guys, etc. That's a lot of time we've spent on basically two amendments. I'm going to try to get through a few more, just rapid face, like just go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, because we're out of time at this point. And I hope you guys find some useful aspects of it. Anywho, freedom of assembly and petition, the two freedoms in the First Amendment that I neglected to talk about largely because I don't value them as much as the other three freedoms in the First Amendment. But you get the concept. If you've read the First Amendment, then you realize that the right of the people to peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances, that's a right that everybody has. The key word here is peaceably, meaning, or peacefully. So the Constitution does protect you if you're doing peaceful protests and petitions. Now, I might be too old to remember this, but what about stuff like the Ferguson riots, where you literally have people flipping over police cars, doing graffiti, lighting things on fire? As stated, no justice, no peace when it comes to protesting police brutality and various other things. Is that protected by the First Amendment? Well, short answer is no, not really. That's engaging in something known as civil disobedience, which is basically the idea that you are knowingly breaking the law. You know that there are laws, but you're choosing to, at the end of the day, break that law because it goes against your beliefs. Now, is civil disobedience protected by the First Amendment? No, not at all. But at the same time, there is a good side of civil disobedience. A lot of our social changes and reforms throughout the 20th century were all engagements of civil disobedience. Rosa Parks, Dr. King, or even going back into the 19th century of Abraham Lincoln, all broke some type of laws. But look what they accomplished when it came to their movement. Obviously, you can make an argument that the means justified the ends, or excuse me, the ends justified the means. So you get the idea. Some protests that aren't necessarily entirely peaceful. I'm not saying Dr. King's protests weren't peaceful at all. They mostly were compared to Ferguson. But you get the idea. Where the Constitution stands, what it protects, and at the end of the day, does it really matter? This does lead to an interesting question, which I really wish I had more time for. Really, really, really wish. The right to assemble is being violated currently when it comes to this whole COVID-19 outbreak. You're watching this at home in case you're wondering how is that the case instead of being at school. My question for you guys would be, does the government have the right to force you to stay at home during a pandemic? Now, I would take the time to go through that, but we got to get going. You guys are graduating. I'm going to miss you guys so much, blah, 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 tear, tear, sad, sad, etc. Short answer is no. Government doesn't have that right. However, we as the people have given it that right because we want to ultimately stay safe, and ultimately we are scared. It's kind of hilarious when you see on the news with all these states doing mandatory quarantines and shutdowns and stuff like that, all of which, for the most part, are highly illegal. Not in some cases, it might be legal because of their state constitution, but in some, it's completely not. But yet the people will allow it because they want to stay safe. I mean, anything to halt the curve and save lives. So that's the short summary. Modern day events. Anywho, slavery and involuntary servitude. As stated previously this week, do I really need to tell you that this is illegal? The concept that involuntary servitude is a person laboring for someone against their will. Of course, slavery is illegal, but it does lead to some gray areas based upon how the 13th Amendment is structured. Like, does that protect you from the draft? Think about it. If the United States government came up to your door saying, I want you, like if it's Uncle Sam with his finger pointing at you saying, I want you to do this, I wouldn't want to go where Uncle Sam tells me to go, which is why I don't blame O'Brien for burning his draft cards. I hope you guys get that joke, or at least make fun of Mr. O'Brien at some point when we get back from the COVID-19 stuff. Short answer to the draft, no, it doesn't protect you from the draft, largely because, legally speaking, you sign up for the draft in the selective service. The express powers to create an army, navy, etc. I can go on, but we gotta move on. Does it protect you from being thrown in the slammer, which is jail? Obviously no. And the reason I put this in here is because I literally was shaking my head. I was rolling on the floor laughing when I read some of your guys' pre-assessment that some of you actually thought the 13th Amendment protects you from going to jail. We would have no justice system at that point. It literally was this seal. I know the kids call it ROFL. Maybe they don't call it that anymore. I don't know. If Mr. Shoens is getting old, please send him an email talking about it at shoensk@bereanwpp.org. I promise to definitely read it. Anywho, the Fourth Amendment. So kind of going a little bit out of order, but there are rights in the Fourth Amendment that you have, such as the right to not be searched or seized in legal searches and seizures, in other words. What does that mean ultimately for you guys? And kind of short summary, the police need a signed warrant from a judge in order to search your home legally. Now, question for you guys, does that extend to your vehicle? Kind of like how Castle Doctrine extends to your vehicle. Kind of. Another thing an officer can use, legally speaking, is something known as probable cause. Like, for instance, if I see someone who literally is driving and swerving around crazily like a mad person, that might be enough probable cause to search their vehicle to see if they have anything else going wrong in there if I pulled them over. Or maybe if there's a situation I pull someone over and they are literally just completely out of it. Well, that could be a justification to skip the warrant process and go straight to search. Now, granted, we do hold our officers to the highest standards. probable cause is basically what you would use to a judge to justify a warrant. If that probable cause is not satisfactory in the eyes of a judge, short summary, I want their badge on my desk by tomorrow, as if I was like some DA or something like that. That being said, when it comes to searching vehicles and homes and all that different stuff, what if they obtain evidence illegally, like with ninjas or something like that? Well, that's something known as the exclusionary rule, which is something that like 2 of you got on your pre-assessment, so well done. If an officer decides to try to cheat the system, maybe hire a trained cat burglar, like a cat ninja or something like that, to break into someone's house or car because they really want to get the evidence to incriminate the person, that's what this rule is for. Anything that is obtained illegally without a warrant or probable cause cannot be used as evidence in a criminal trial, meaning it has to be thrown out and not taken into consideration. You might want to keep that in mind because if you do find yourself on trial, all that evidence has to be submitted before the actual trial. You and your attorney might want to question that evidence if it was obtained illegally by law enforcement. Don't let them pull a fast one on you, in other words. Now, there are exceptions to the exclusionary rule, which I'm not going to bore you with because that's a lot of reading, and I know that some of you guys, 2 of you guys, 1 of you guys are actually interested in it. But here are the 4 exceptions to the exclusionary rule, and basically it just surmises where you could actually use illegal evidence in court. But anywho, can a police officer do something like a drug or a sobriety test on you without a warrant or probable cause? Now, this is a bit of a gray area. And when I mean gray area, it's more of like I'd need like 30 minutes to explain and have some visuals and maybe do like a scenario where we have Nick Racine as the police officer pulling over like Joshua Brannon, would be really interesting and awesome and exciting. But let me just kind of short summary for it for you guys. Generally speaking, legally, you are not required to take field sobriety tests, but keep in mind that may not stop the officer from arresting you for a DUI. And there's a little bit more of a catch to that. Refusal can also lead to some very serious consequences. Some less serious would be like your license being automatically revoked. Because when you get a driver's license, you give something known as implied consent, meaning I imply to uphold the laws because I am driving and operating a motor vehicle. If you are not giving that implied consent to test you for it, that could lead you to possibly never driving again, could lead you to some other legal problems down the road. But the long story short is you actually have rights to say no. But anywho, that's all I got for when it comes to civil liberties. Now, granted in mind, I would love to have spent more time talking about these civil liberties, but be that as it may, you guys are graduating next month, and there's a lot more in detail that I would love to talk about, and if you ever want to discuss about them, by all means, I'll do my best. Now, I know KP might be wondering, what's the deal, Mr. Shoens? It's not like anyone would want to abuse my rights. Maybe. But the iPhone that is either on your desk or in your pocket disagrees. If only I had the time to talk a little bit more about those specific rights, such as like your right to privacy in the 14th Amendment, but alas, we're out of it. But do me one favor, or 2 favors actually. One, keep in mind that your rights are constantly under attack. Make sure you know them so people don't abuse them or take them away from you. And the second favor, say hi to the FBI for me. Anywho, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Be ready for the assessment on Friday. I'll give you more details about it when we reach there.